I think it's going to be interesting to hear your perspective on this because you're actually kind of in it and stuff. So it's
I've got a glass or something to see me through, So.
Oh, good. Yes.
Not Ribena.
Better prepared than I am.
So welcome everyone to another Chargeheads Live, and we're very excited to have John Chambers from TiVo Solutions, who's got lots of experience. Yeah, hi John. Lots of experience on the motorsport front, and we've got Kevin and Alex, of course, as usual, and myself, Tim. And today we're going to be talking about racing EVs on circuits. So I thought, who better to have John with us? And if anybody's interested, myself and John did a live quite a few months back, so go and check that out if you want a bit more information on motorsport EVs as well, but I'm sure we'll cover plenty today. So first of all, John, I suppose if you introduce yourself to people who haven't come across yourself before, and then we'll get cracking, starting talking about everything to do with EV and motorsport.
Yeah, well, you disappeared. You tripped over your camera. So I'm John Chambers. The company I've got at the moment is called TiVo Solutions, which I created actually in a way so that I could buy and develop parts to make my Tesla Model 3 go faster. And I thought if I could do that, other people might want to do it as well. So that's why we sort of created the company and developed products like uprated brakes and uprated suspension systems. Because I could see when I bought first Model 3, I could see the potential in competing with it actually, and it kind of got me interested in doing that again. So, and all EVs tend to need something doing to them before you take them racing or even just on a track day. They're heavy cars. Brakes is a common issue. And, the Model 3, it was built, all cars are built to a price these days, so everything can be improved. And under the skin, they're just like any other car. We don't touch the battery or the high voltage system or anything like that. And there's no need to, it's putting out enough power. It's just getting that power to the asphalt better and getting it stopped better. That's what we're trying to do with it, really. And my background is kind of in motorsport since the 80s. So, I had a few contacts and a bit of experience to draw on there. So that's what I do.
Yeah. No, that's great. Thanks for the intro, John. And the actual subject today is, will race circuits rejecting EVs speed up decline in motorsport? And I know that a lot has changed with circuits, certainly in UK, and it's changing quite negatively in America. And Marlon Mays just made a really good point there, saying that it reminds him of ski resorts initially banning snowboarders. That is until they figured out how much money they could make from welcoming the boarders. And I think that's quite a good place to start. And just say hello, PWNE Motors, hi from the US, and TiVo Solutions. I think I've watched a few of their videos. Oh yeah, what's your YouTube channel, John? Remind us.
Well, actually, the YouTube is called Tesla Gurus.
That's it.
So GURUS, yeah. So there's a few videos on there that, and again, it was stuff when I was looking at myself to buy a Tesla specifically. There was not a lot of information out there other than a few US forums, so it was trying to help explain some of the idiosyncrasies of the car and how it all works. Because new owners, of any car have always got a lot of questions. So it was a good way of doing that, really. And also advertising TiVo a bit as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, I haven't done much track work. I've mainly been doing the Yobbo drifting type of driving. I think, Alex, you've done a bit of track racing before, I believe.
Yeah, I've never done anything competitive on track myself, but I've done a number of track days and sprint days and kind of skid pan sessions and stuff. I've always really enjoyed it, and it's an interesting one, isn't it? I mean, motorsport. The thing I tend to come across when it's the kind of standard argument, isn't it? Is that kind of there's a century thing with motorsport, and I think there is, but I think from my point of view, the thing I've always enjoyed track wise is being on track, and I can't see any reason why you wouldn't enjoy an EV on track any more than more or less than you'd enjoy a combustion engine car. It's finding, as you say, those idiosyncrasies and the things that you can improve with those cars that are going to be different to a petrol or diesel vehicle.
It's good to have that open-minded attitude and. It's not something that I have to say that we found particularly kind of early on when there was just 2 or 3 of us maybe taking, Model 3s out at Brands Hatch. You sense some hostility, But I think it's the same old thing with EVs. People just don't like the idea of change. That's really all it is. Because one thing that happened at Brands Hatch, which I tell a lot of people about, is there was a guy that came along on track day, and he had about 4 or 5 cars there, but they were all the old school, Mark II Escorts and stuff like that. Really lovely examples of them. And he lived quite close to Brands Hatch, and he'd bring them down to Brands, I don't know, 6 or 7 times a year, and play around with them. And he came up to me in the pit because I had the Model 3 there, and he said, "I was thinking of buying one of these as a road car. Can you take me around?" So I took him around for a few laps. And when he got out, he said, "Right, I'm definitely getting one of those." And then the next time I turned up at Brands Hatch, he didn't have his old school Escorts. He had his Model 3 that he was driving around. So, you just need to show people what they're capable of, and
Totally,
change minds, very quickly.
Bums on seats and all that. What about yourself, Kevin? Have you done much track work?
I have some very different track experience. So I've probably have the record for going the slowest round Thruxton race circuit, which is the UK's fastest track. So I drove round there. So I've driven round there with Mission Motorsport. But I mean, one of the things that we did do is Thruxton has a curfew for cars at certain times. The Zoe we took around for the record didn't need to follow that curfew. So I'm probably one of the few people who've driven round Thruxton at night. And to save power, we did drive around Thruxton on DRLs. I wouldn't recommend just driving around Thruxton on DRLs. It's a bit dark. But yeah, so we did, I think we ended up doing 9.9 miles per kilowatt hour around Thruxton. So yeah, I've driven the slowest round the UK's fastest track. But I have been round there with Vauxhall used to do VXR days. So I've driven around tracks fast in other people's cars.
Yeah, I've instructed.
Alex has been brave enough to use his own car. I've only done it in others.
I've instructed on a few of those VXR days when I was doing instruction a lot. Yeah,
the most fun I had on that was actually the course of VXR was the most fun because you could have more fun because you weren't going so fast that you would get, if you got it wrong, it would end badly, but you could still have fun in it. Although I did. Remember, on one thing, lap round there, the instructor did say, because I put too much power on in the corner, he said, next time, don't add more power, you'll just crash faster. Because I tried to solve it with power rather than slowing down.
That's the thought of thing I'd say as an instructor, yeah. I was there for that Mission Motorsport record thing at Thruxton right at the end. So yeah, so
that was me with Enzo tires and stuff.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I saw them on the day. Yeah, have they actually come? Are they selling those yet? Those tires?
They sell them. I think they've got big contracts with Royal Mail and one of the taxi firms. So they've made them more for the kind of business of business fleets rather than the consumer. But so they're actually quite good grippy around the track because you've probably met the chief exec of Mission Motorsport.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he took me round in the Zoe. I've never been so scared in my life.
I was going to say, Kevin, you got nearly 10 miles per kilowatt hour. Just as a comparison, John, what do you get normally in your Tesla?
Well, if on the road, 500. No, it's the rule of thumb. I'll tell you, which is fairly accurate, is it's 20% of what you would get on the road. So, I mean, 20% of the range. So you can say, it's 4 or 5 times perhaps the kilowatt hours that you get on the road. Yeah.
Well, straight away, I want to think about charging, but let's first of all concentrate on the subject matter, which is about the circuits rejecting. So, what's been your experience so far? Because we have spoken before. I know it's been difficult to find racetracks, but what is the situation right now in the UK? And it does look like PWN E-Motors has mentioned, he's from America, that the autocross Gymkhana so far no problem with EVs other than figuring out the classing, which is really, really good to hear. So thanks for sharing.
Seeing that, you've got now the Ford Mustang Mach-E, which is designed for the autocross in America. It's the kind of run what you've brung basically idea, where it's sort of a grass circuit where they've got the Mach-E and they've got rid of the glass panoramic roof. So it's a Mustang Mach-E GT with a solid roof, and it's got the Compomotive style alloys and a bit of more ground clearance and off-road stuff, and that's become really popular car for it, the Mach-E, especially the all-wheel drive one. So Ford have tweaked it accordingly.
Interesting, yeah. I mean, I think the situation in the US, I think with autocross is not too bad because for one thing, they don't use circuits on the whole. They use autocross is a bit like what we call over here. What do we call it? I've done them. Auto solos. It's very confusing, all these terms that we have, and it is a little bit between the US and the UK. It's a bit even more confusing. But generally, they use over there a big car park, and it's cones that you're driving around. So it's what we call over here a sprint. It can be like that, but it also sprints over here a lot of the time are actually run on circuits. So you would do standing start, and then you would do maybe 1 lap or 1.5 laps of a circuit like Brands Hatch for your time. So you're not competing against anybody. You're just competing against the clock. And that's the same for autocross in the States. So when we talk about a bit later, probably about racing, there's a big difference between doing an event like that, which you can generally get into in an EV, and racing, which is much more difficult because the safety requirements for racing are always much more stringent because there are multiple cars, on the track at one time. But so in the US, there have been a couple of circuits recently that were okay with EVs for track days and for some competitive stuff, and then they've suddenly banned them. And that's kind of been the story a little bit in the UK, where back in 2016, 2017, there were a few people in this country that were doing stuff, competing even in Model S's when they first came out. And I think what happened was that the circuit owners and the organisation that administers all of this, which used to be called the MSA, Motorsport Association, they didn't really know what was going on. These cars would be entering in a class like 4-wheel drive, any engine. And I think what happened was a couple of people probably cottoned on or were a bit anti, and, they drew it to the attention of the organising bodies. And then what they did was come in and basically sort of put rules in place that banned all EVs taking part. So from 2017 to 2020, really, you couldn't enter an EV in anything competitive. And the circuits also heard about that. And because they're always kind of looking towards because the circuit's doing competitive stuff, every weekend. When they heard about those rules, they went, "Oh, hold on a minute, maybe we should look at this as well." So I think there was this kind of big fear cloud that was going on, and some of it, okay, I can understand. You do need to have the right training, you need the right PPE and the right fire extinguishers, for instance, if you had a battery fire. But there were some elements of it that were just really there, I think, to discourage any EV owners from coming along and doing anything like that. So, one of the things that made a massive difference was actually Mission Motorsport. Mission Motorsport put a training program in place to go around all the circuits in the UK and train them up so that they knew how to deal with an EV. Fire is always the biggest fear, I think. But what happens if an EV just stops on circuit? How do you recover it? Is it actually dangerous? Are you going to get electrocuted? Because that's what the marshals thought and still think a lot of the time, that if there's an EV there, it's dangerous. Even if it's just sitting there doing nothing, it's dangerous. So Mission have gone around all the circuits in the UK. Back in 2019, probably about a quarter of circuits just wouldn't allow EVs. And today, I think there's pretty much every one of them is okay with them. There are a couple that I've not been to recently, like Blighton Park in Lincolnshire, and a couple of other smaller ones. Prestwold Hall is like an air track or an airfield type circuit. Probably they won't want to do it because they haven't done the training. But all of the major circuits that you can name in the UK now are happy with EVs.
And it is just OEM EVs, isn't it? Because they don't want any EV conversions or anything like that on the track, do they? That's
a problem still. And it's down to the Motorsport Association or it's now called UK. What's it called? Motorsport UK. Yeah.
Yep.
With their rules, they've got this rule book which is called the Blue Book, only because it's got a blue cover. That's why it's called the Blue Book, and it's got pages and pages of rules. they took the FIA's rules originally on EVs, which they put in place to cover the likes of basically the international electric racing series that are out there, which are very onerous. There's a lot of stuff in there that just doesn't apply to a saloon car, for instance. But they sort of took that as their template, and unfortunately, as soon as you do anything at all to a standard EV saloon car, put a roll cage in it, for instance, or mess around in any way with the electrical system, it's then deemed to be a bespoke. They call it a bespoke EV, and they have a whole different set of rules that I doubt many people in the UK that just want to do a little sprint event or a club competition would ever even consider, because it's just it'll be too much money and too much effort to do. So yeah, anything that's modified is a bit of a no-no at the moment.
So how you obviously you get out there racing, and I know you've got a lot of friends and a group because you've got the Facebook group, which Motorsport EV Motorsport UK, isn't it, on Facebook?
Yeah, there's a couple actually. There's like track, and there's a Tesla one which is sort of track and racing discussions, and then there's an EV competitors one as well on Facebook. Yeah, there's a few there now.
And how's everyone finding it? Does it feel like the scene is growing at the moment? Is it?
I think I've spent since 2019 trying to encourage people to sort of do it, but it's traditionally getting into motorsport. It's not really that easy.
No,
it's expensive. There's quite a lot of things to do, like the rule books. Like if you want to do racing, you've now got to, and you're like me, over 60, you've got to have an ECG. You've got to have all these medical things done, which is going to cost you hundreds and hundreds of pounds, by the way, even to get your license before you've entered an event. Now, that's not the same for the sort of sprint events that I was talking about earlier, which are generally designed to be accessible, and it's called grassroots motorsport because what we're trying to do is get people in at the bottom, as cheaply as possible to just have fun with their cars at the weekends. So, but if you do a sprint event now, and if you've got to follow their rules, it means you've got to have the right helmet, you've got to have the right racing suit. Even if you're in a standard car, a standard EV, you've got to wear a fireproof racing suit. So all of these things add up, and that means before you've even entered the first event, you've probably spent 1,500 quid at least, I would have thought.
Yeah,
I've got a little guide somewhere that I created that breaks down all the costs, and it's so for me trying to sort of get on the forums and try and encourage people come along and do this sprint. We do a great sprint series which is down in Liddon Hill in Kent, which is a lovely little circuit, and that's twice a year they do a sprint down there, and it's a brilliant event, quite relaxed, and we've been trying to get more people to do that every year. But if you try and get somebody to try and do that one event and they know they've got to spend 1,500 quid, two grand before they even started, it's not going to happen really. So that's why I think it's been difficult to grow the numbers. And that might change, but I don't know. It's motorsport generally seems to be a little bit in decline because of the environmental, reasons, the cost part of it. It's just not cheap for anyone to do anything in a car these days, So just get the word out, get more people. Tell your friends, come and do a sprint with us.
I did see that there was a more of a kind of a public track day in February in Snetterton. One of the guys shared it on one of the Tesla groups. Is it you found that just the normal public track days are quite well attended by EVs now?
It's getting better. There's still kind of barriers to doing it, which is charging mainly.
Yeah.
I know some circuits are just not at all friendly. A good circuit, for instance, would be Brands Hatch, where there are 2 supercharger locations within 10 to 15 minutes of the track. So what we do there is we meet in the morning to charge to 100% at one of those superchargers. So go to the track. So we've already lost maybe 5 or 6% getting from there to the track. And then we can do round Brands Hatch, which is the small circuit is about 1.2 miles. We can do 30 or 40 laps around there before we get down to like 10%, or if you want to risk it, 8%, and then and then we have to then go off to the supercharger again. So we can charge maybe you could probably do it twice or even 3 times in a day if you wanted to do it that way, and get in maybe 80 laps, 100 laps even, which actually is not bad. It's plenty for most people to do that number of laps in a day. Is fine. So, but you go to somewhere like Silverstone, that's a big long track. You're lucky to get 10 laps out of a charge in the Model 3, and there aren't any fast chargers on the circuit that you can use. So, that's not great. But yeah, we do see them. We do see EVs out on all the tracks actually, but not in massive numbers still.
No.
It's still that specialism thing, isn't it? It's a bit like the aftermarket. You get all this stuff about, if your battery fails, you've got to, they offer up the prices to go into a dealer to get a replacement one. It's that there's not a huge aftermarket yet that will have the solutions to fix those things and recondition them, and the breadth of parts available to kind of do that. I mean, that's starting to come to life now, and I think the more people that kind of, when you've got kind of accessible routes into it and things that you can upgrade, and where the rules are starting to kind of align, that all kind of gives people the confidence, I guess, to get involved with it, doesn't it? So,
no, absolutely.
I thought, I was hoping that kind of when the second-hand market, when the prices started to come down, which they did a couple of years ago, didn't they? Really substantially. I thought that might get more people out, because I think there's always the worry that people seem to have these days about warranty and insurance. Those are the two. So insurance is a difficult one. On a track day, it costs a lot of money to insure your car for damage, but people are worried about other people driving into them, and it's a genuine concern. I mean, my take has always been you need to pick the right track day organisers to go with, because the circuits are running their own track days now, but it used to be that there'd be loads of companies that started up that would organise. They'd hire the circuit and they'd sell the places, But I'd say 70% of those I wouldn't go on their track days, because they were more interested in getting 30, 40 cars along to boost their profits than they were making sure that those 30, 40 cars were actually driven well. So there's a handful of track day organisers that I would recommend, that actually, if somebody drives really badly, they'll get sent home, no question. That's it. So they tend to be very safe days,
You mentioned charging. I think that is probably one of the main, other than the cost you mentioned of obviously doing the racing, etc. I think the charging is quite a big challenge, because none of these circuits tend to have much power, and they don't really want to put the investment in because they don't see the demand. But it's, again, typical chicken and egg, unless you've got the chargers, you're going to have the EVs. So I think there was a recent, I don't know if it's already happened. There was a one-off EV event. I think it was in Anglesey, and they didn't have chargers there. And I suggested maybe using some movable 40 kilowatt chargers. So there are kind of temporary solutions that can be just dropped in place. But then again, it is cost, because it does cost a lot of money. And, DC chargers, they take a lot of power. And what you're charging it with the grid, you charge it with a diesel HVO generator. So, it can be very, very expensive. But yeah, if you, have you seen any sites other than Brands Hatch, any sites that have charging on site DC, or none of them at all yet?
Truxton used to have one, because we used it for the.
It does have one just outside the circuit. Yeah,
just on the ground, isn't it?
Yeah, that was there long before EVs even were coming along. Because I think the guy that owns the airport there, he had an EV, so he got one put in for his car. Basically, it is, but it's I think it's two 50 kilowatt chargers, I think.
It was.
So you've got to have. The trouble is you need 150 kilowatt, 200 plus charger, and you need several of them, because if you're going to try and get 5 or 6 EVs along, guess what? As happens with us, when we have 5 or 6 Model 3s turn up, they will go out on the track at the same time, so they will run out of juice at the same time. I mean, this is what we try and do, trying to sort of tell people that are coming along to these days, have a bit of a charging strategy, before you arrive, so you know where you're going to go, how long you need to be there, and all that sort of stuff, so you don't just run down and then everyone goes to the charger and they're all full, because that can happen. I
mean, I would imagine on that front that somewhere like Silverstone might have an advantage over somewhere like, say, Thruxton, because, I mean, Silverstone's strategically well located to put a charging hub in and kind of have it as a 7 days a week as you're driving through type of thing. Whereas somewhere in the back end, I mean, like Pembrey or something in South Wales isn't going to want to put a charging hub in because they're kind of in the back end of,
That's the problem.
Yeah,
that is the problem. But for instance, I mean, take Thruxton as an example, because I've worked at Thruxton as instructor for quite a few years previously, so I had a good relationship with them, and I started to talk to them about the idea of having EVs as a driving experience there. And they were very open. They actually wanted to do it, but one of the issues was, even if they had like 4 Model 3s and they were alternating between the 4 of them so that some could be charging while some were out on track, they'd still really need something in the pits, and it comes down to logistics. Often the 3-phase supply that you'd need to put a fast charger in the pits is like 500 yards on the other side of the paddock. So just to do that groundwork, to lay the cables, would have been too expensive, for them to consider it.
Trenching costs are massive, aren't they? I can't remember. I saw some statistics about this recently, talking about office charging and depot charging, and talking about the length of the amount of cost that goes into trenching. It's like a significant portion of the cost of a depot charging infrastructure. So when you got that, you haven't necessarily you possibly in a race circuit want the chargers in a place where you wouldn't necessarily want to run that level of electrical connection.
No, this is it exactly right. I mean, we've also spoke to Jonathan Palmer of Motorsport MSV, he's fine up to a point. He's interested in doing things, but only if they're going to make him money. And
which
usually someone else has got to pay for it up front as well, not him. So, he's interested. He was actually, his idea was, because he bought a big, I don't know if you know about this place he bought in France years ago, this big ex-military sort of airfield, and he was going to turn it into another, like Bedford is, a big autodrome type place with driving experiences and racing and stuff. And I think the trouble is, after he bought it, he still owns it, but he has not done anything with it at all. And this is over 10 years ago, I think. When we were talking to him about EVs, he was saying, I had an idea about that would be an EV only experience there. And we'd actually fly people from the UK in an electric plane so that the whole thing from end to end would be electric. Great idea, but he's never going to do it because he doesn't want to spend the money doing it. He'd rather get partners to do that. So it's probably not going to happen. And so his circuits have got a lot of electrical outlets in the pits. And, we used to plug in when we come off track, because we get a little bit, we get 1 or 2 laps back, while we're in the pits in terms of charging. And what did he do? Eventually, he slapped this £50 minimum charge on if you wanted to plug your car into the pits. So, we don't do that anymore. So he's almost acting against us now, really. But it's business. That's what it comes down to, isn't it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's really funny you mentioned, and I think Tommy Temper mentioned it as well, is the fact that EVs have dropped quite considerably in price, and the fact you can get a performance Tesla Model 3 for £16,000 now. Yes, high mileage, but that's not necessarily that bad for battery degradation. And plus we've got, as before we jumped on the call, being live, there's so many good potential electric cars that you can take on track. So Kevin and Alex are going to be very lucky in having an Ioniq 5N to play with soon, I believe. And Alex had a MG Cyberster recently. And we're just talking about another car, which I didn't know about. I don't know if anybody else knows about this, but John, you were talking about the Ioniq 6N. I didn't realize it was going to be even more kind of track focused than the 5. Did you know much about it?
Well, I've seen what it was. Somebody at Castle Combe, when I was there for a track day recently, we got onto the subject of the 5, and he said, "Oh no, you got to wait for the 6 to come along." And he'd obviously been told about this by his dealer. And then I looked that up, and I can see that there is a 6N kind of planned, but whether it comes to the UK at all, I don't know. And if you look at just the specification of the 6, it's pretty good, actually. It seems to be more... The thing about the 5 is it's more of an SUV, really, isn't it? Whereas the 6 is more of a saloon car.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
you kind of expect the 6 to be better on track, I would say.
I mean, I've been lucky enough to drive the i4 M50 on Millbrook, the up and downy track. What was it called?
Alpine circuit.
The Alpine, yeah.
And that was a really, really exciting to drive. You driven any of the M50s at all?
Me?
Yeah.
No, I haven't. But Steve Cropley, who's the editor of Autocar, he entered an M50 into a sprint that we did. This was the one that we did on the road year before last in Cornwall.
I think I saw the pictures. Yes.
Yeah. So he got that. It was a press car, that BMW lent him, but he entered that into that sprint, and did okay. The thing is, you can see on paper it's not going to beat a Model 3 performance. It's just too heavy.
Right.
So that's always a bad starting point. But yeah, it was okay. It was quite capable. And
I guess from a potentially from a risk point of view, I mean the issue, and talking about kind of being selective in terms of who you let on track. I mean, one of the interesting things with EVs is obviously there's been a massive jump in the kind of the usual power that you would expect. Whereas like 10 years ago, if you put somebody into like a 320D, it'd be like 190, 200 horsepower, and that was like, oh my god, I can have a company car that's got like 190, 200 horsepower, and that was like mega power. Whereas now you've got people driving around in company cars that are like 300, 400 horsepower, and then these cars fit talk about like a Model 3 performance. And if you're going from a jump from it's a hell of a for somebody who's starting out in motorsport, it's a hell of a jump in performance perhaps from what they've if they've had any track experience before. I mean, there's a kind of a being selective in terms of trying to get people used to the track environment in those cars as well. I guess it's quite.
Remember us joking that we went to Caffeine and Machine, didn't we, with your Polo, the German thing, and there was a Porsche 911 there, and we worked out that a Volvo XC40 is more powerful than it, and it's like that shouldn't be more powerful than a kind of Porsche from the 80s or whatever.
Having think about things like Enduracar and all those other kind of series, it'd be interesting seeing like a little race series for kind of old Leafs and things. We talk about saying you spend 16k on something like on a Model 3, but for a lot of people, I mean, there's that you talk about the grassroots side of things. 16k for a track car is quite a large investment if you're going to do things like strip it and cage it and all the rest of it. A little series for racing IMEVs, or I guess you can get into range issues with some of these early cars, but a very competitive door-to-door racing series in a Leaf or an IMEV or a Zoe or something would be quite a fun way to. I mean, ultra competitive, all the same spec,
I totally agree. Yeah, I totally agree. But this is where these rules come in again that are just designed to stop that from happening. Because if you do any racing, you got to have a roll cage. If you put a roll cage in and don't do anything else, it's suddenly become this bespoke EV. And a bespoke EV has a whole different set of rules, and you have to spend. So, for instance, one of the rules is you have to have one of these traffic light systems that you'd have on a Formula E, for instance. So any FIA electrically powered car has to have the FIA safety stuff on it. And one of the safety things is this traffic light system that tells the marshals, is the battery, connected? Is the car on? There's only one company that makes these, and guess what? They're about 15 grand, just for this traffic light system. So of course, it's more than the cost of a Zoe, isn't it? So you can't do it, and that's the trouble.
Model 3 standard range you get for that money now. So
yeah, and this is what I've been banging on about all along. Really, is the fact that it's the rule makers and the people. It's the politics side of it. It's the rule makers that are stopping progress. And really, they don't really want EVs. They've taken away the electric part of the British Touring Car Championship from this year. So it had a little token hybrid system. Do you know about that? On the that this year it's gone. So again, they're not really worried about. They say they're worried about sustainability and about trying to get electric cars into. They're not. They don't want to get electric cars into motorsport. Otherwise, they'd be doing things to encourage it.
Ultimately, I think this, and as per the title of the video and the live today, is ultimately I think it's just going to harm motorsport massively, because there's only a finite number of ICE vehicles to begin with, and yes, and motorsport will turn into this very, very expensive motorsport because all the other circuits will shut down because no one's going to them, because it seems like the younger generation are just not as interested in racing. And
right.
what better thing to start in an electric car, or because a lot of it seems like the younger generation are interested in more electric cars. it makes me think that maybe we should just try and find someone with a private track somewhere and just buy those leases and just do a bit of an undercover, non-public, racetrack.
There was a way. If only there was a way.
Yeah.
But in this country, you've got everything against you. You've got the councils against you, planning permission. There's so many things.
Anybody know anyone with a private racetrack or airfield that I put some cones on for us?
I've got one in my back garden. I don't know why you're even looking any further.
But you see, that's the trouble. Is this isn't just something that is kind of the whole motorsport rule book. That isn't just a private thing. That is in law, passed into law. So it's
really, I didn't realize.
Oh yeah. So if you did that, the police could actually come along and arrest you.
They'd have to catch me in my Nissan Leaf first.
Yeah, well, they would. Yeah,
as long as you've done more than about 10 laps, you're good.
Yeah.
So any competitive event in the UK that you might put on, you have to have a license for as the organizer, and all the people competing have to have a license as well. That's the law. So yeah, you just can't do that. It's not allowed. I think in Ireland it's different though, because I think our friends at EV Breakers that have built a caged Model 3.
Of course, yeah, I've seen it go around the track. It's a good shout.
You can do anything. Because you can do anything in Ireland, can't you?
Off we go, chaps. Right, book a boat.
Put the ferry tickets. We're not far from.
No, you're not. I'll stay the night at yours, chaps, and then we'll head over. Yeah, because they've got so EV Breakers. So I've got the batch full from my TVR. People might have seen their Tesla Model 3 Performance, which is fully stripped, got a cage in, and it looks amazing as well. Great bunch of lads, and I've seen that go hammer around the track. I still think they've got a few things they're still doing to it, because I think it was ultimately a write-off when they started playing with it. So maybe Ireland is the promised land then, John.
We'd definitely be able to get. That's the first place in the sort of British Isles you'd be able to get a racing series started. I would say, but mainland, no, you wouldn't. You just, if you got someone like Jonathan Palmer behind you, you could. And I mean, he was sort of asking the questions of us when we were chatting to him that day at Brands. He was sort of saying what he was sort of saying was, you could get 16, 17 people together with Model 3s to race, couldn't you? And I was thinking, well, we can't even get 5 to a track day, so how are we going to do that? You know? Because it's just the cost, really, more than anything.
No, I get that. Well, maybe it would actually be less expensive to go to Ireland for some of this fun racing. I'll give the guys over at EV Breakers a call to find out what the situation is.
Yeah,
but yeah,
the other place is Japan. Japan is the other place.
Yes, I've seen their Tesla Model 3 racing championships. Really good.
Yeah.
No, for sure.
Bit of a long road trip, though.
Just slightly. Yeah, just through Russia and China, be fine. Evening all. Sorry I'm late. Sat in the i3 charging. Okay. Good to see you, Mod Scotsman. Holyhead Port is still closed. I must nip down and have a look at this Model 3. Calvin has just been a busy fella. Yes, I forgot you were in that neck of the woods as well. So yeah, I mean, I probably don't support motorsport. Oh, Alex is gone. I don't support motorsport as much as I should because I'm very busy. I don't even watch the Formula E. I've watched a couple of series, but I always tend to miss them. But it does feel that that appetite is starting to wane quite a bit. Is it because people don't see EVs as exciting? But there's so many examples of exciting EVs out there. We've mentioned the Ioniq 5N, the 6N, the new Tesla Model 3 American spec is amazing. We've got the McMurty, we've got the that Ford Transit electric van that was round Goodwood recently.
Oh yeah, the super van.
Yeah, it was fast. It was fast, wasn't it?
Well, I remember talking to the person on the Ford thing because the original, before they did Pikes Peak with it, the original spec was 1,700 brake horsepower because it was supposed to be 2,000 originally. It's back up to 2,000 now, but they said it was a bit leery at 2,000 brake horsepower. It's like, I find that quite amusing, a bit leery at 2,000 brake horsepower. I mean, that's the thing is you can have so much power in an EV. I suppose that's the one disadvantage with a track thing is if, why you pick someone who's really well organized with it, because at the end of the day, they're quite quick, but it's still 2.5 tons going into a corner if you don't know what you're doing to stop, and the physics of it are still a bit of an issue.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I would say, and that was something that worried me really. And as Alex I think said earlier, you know, there are these people that have had company cars recently. You know, even an M series BMW might only be 200-300 horsepower, and they're suddenly getting into a 550 horsepower Model 3. You know, how there aren't more of them in hedges. Well, I do know, because the thing is, as I sort of figured out from watching and sitting next to people. When we go around tracks, you know, to give them a few pointers, the car sorts it out for them most of the time. You know, the traction control and the torque vectoring system in the Model 3 particularly, you know, is very good. And
because what is the Ioniq 5 is 630 brake horsepower in Grin Road, and it's that's more powerful than Ferrari Enzo was. And it's like, this is a vehicle that's only 60. I mean, 64k is expensive, but not for that sort of power level.
Yeah, I'm absolutely right.
Sorry, go on. Sorry, John.
No, just it was another little funny anecdote I just remembered. Was there are a few of us at Brands Hatch, and we pretty much everyone that goes along to these days are very well behaved, and it's usually the ice slot that are the troublemakers. And one of our group span his car in the first bend at Brands Hatch, you know. So he came back in and he said, what happened then? You know, because as I say, that is quite unusual, you know. And because you can't, even with track mode, I don't know if you know, and even with your boost module, Tim, you know, you can't, I don't think you can turn off traction control completely. Even in drift mode, you have to have some steering input for it to reduce.
I'm still waiting. I'm still waiting to get some tyres and find a track, because obviously I don't want to be doing it on the public road. Gone are those days, John. So, and now I've got the speaker exhaust system just to beef up the noise now.
Right. Okay.
I hasten to add,
make yourself even more unpopular.
Absolutely. Yeah. Jet noise is my favourite so far. The ice sounds, that's just ridiculous, obviously. But I was just going to say that Mod Scotsman mentioned about there was a mini cup, which sounds really fun, by Next Gen Cup. That's the Japan Cup, I think, if I remember. Tell me if I'm wrong. Evening, folks. Maybe One Make Series would help. Renault 5 Cup, anyone? Yeah, the Renault 5 looks quite an exciting, fun car.
Especially that turbo one they're bringing out. I mean, I'm still undecided whether them putting turbo on everything like Porsche Taycans and stuff is really necessary, because it's now a spec, because there is no turbo involved. No. But I see where they're coming from, is to try and go back to the idea of like the Porsche 911 turbo and the Renault 5 turbo, isn't it? But
I don't know. As I say, it's a great idea. One Make Series is a great idea, because you could get a manufacturer behind it, you know, putting some money into it. But you're still going to come up with this problem of the rules that the governing body, you know, slaps on everybody, and there's no way around that at the moment. So,
no, it's. I'm sure it'll get there. I think it needs to, because you think about these tracks. I mean, it's maybe it could be a government excuse to just whack a few houses on, you know, a bit like, you know, certain airfields like Halconbury and places like that. But I think there is the appetite. I think they just need, like a lot of things with the EV transition, just sort out the regulations, a bit like electric scooters and such like. So yeah, have you got any EV events coming up, John, that you'd wanted to highlight at all?
I think the first track day that a few of us are going to be at is probably in April or May, because it's kind of seasonal, you know, obviously because of mainly in this country because of the weather. So things sort of stop in October, November at the latest, and then there's nothing going on till sort of March, April time. So I think we've got one at just having a quick look actually, Abingdon Airfield on the 26th of April.
Okay, and where do we find all of these? Anybody that's interested, where do we find all these track days that you're attending with the rest of the EV circuit crew?
Well, good question, really. I suppose in terms of the Facebook groups, if it's Tesla oriented, there's this one called Tesla Track Discussions, Tesla Track and Racing Discussions, which is, you don't have to own a Tesla to be on that one, but you know, obviously that's what it's aimed at. And there is another one which is called the one that you mentioned earlier, which is I haven't got it down on my list here.
EV Motorsport UK, I think, from memory.
Yeah, that's right.
I posted this video in the chat, so I'm not sure if anyone's watching at the moment saw that. But anyone that's watching at the moment, we're talking about electric cars in motorsport. Give us a like, give us a share. We've got John Chambers on, and he specialises in mainly Teslas, but essentially EVs for track. And if you've missed what we've been talking about so far, I'd urge you to go back and have a listen. It's all important stuff if you're looking to put your EV on the track, or interested in, what the costs are, that sort of thing. So yeah, I mean, where do you see this going? I mean, obviously, I'm thinking that it's going to be a negative from a motorsport point of view. Bearing in mind, the government are bringing back the the petrol and diesel ban 2030, hybrid 2035. I don't think it's going to do much for motorsport. So where do you think this needs to go? Is it just about a regulation thing? Who needs to pull their weight here, do you think?
Well, it's a lot of things. It's the government, of course, and it's because you've got to have an encouragement to do these things. You've got to be. It's no point in just saying, okay, as happened with the competitive side of stuff. They said, look, there's the rule book. We've written the rules now. You've got an EV. As long as you meet those rules, you can go and compete in it. Yeah. And that's what they said. But the trouble is, of course, the rules were too difficult to meet and too expensive to meet. So unless they're going to do something that actually encourages you or helps you to do that, and that could be money, but it could also just be because what we find is, a motor club that might be running an event at somewhere like North Weald, or that's closing now, actually, another one that you said about building houses, but that was a motorsport venue for years that's now going. But Liddon Hill, someone like Liddon Hill. Yeah. So someone organises a sprint event at Liddon Hill, which is a nice, as I say, relaxed sort of way of getting into motorsport, whatever car you've got. Those rules come out, and of course they have to have in them to enter the event a class for EVs. Yeah. So a lot of them aren't putting those classes in. Even at that stage, they're not putting the classes in. So you can't even enter. Even if you meet all the technical rules and you've got all the gear and everything, you can't enter unless you've got a class to enter. So what's encouraging those organisers to put an EV class in? At the moment, nothing at all. And in fact, the excuse they have is that, if we put an EV class in, we've been told that we've got to have these fire extinguishers and this PPE and these trained marshals. It's going to cost us more money.
Do they have to have a plunge pool?
Not anymore. But
okay, tell me about that, because that's what I always used to hear about. North Weald, the only place I've ever partaken in motorsport. That's good to shout out there. Yeah. So what is the only one that I've done was at the EV only track day, the first one. I think it was the second one, because I think there was an Anglesey, which Paul Compton pulled me up on. But yeah, there's a great video on Chargeheads, really early one with John's in it. He let me drive his Tesla, which was great, and showed how awful I was on track. But yeah, it's worth watching. And RS Simmons were on that video as well, in their Porsche Taycan and loads of others. And it was a very, very old video, but some pretty good camera action and some bad presenting from me, as always. So yeah, what was I getting at? I've lost my train of thought now.
Is what we need to do to encourage people to enter, I think, wasn't it? Organisers to.
That's it.
The organisers don't have an incentive, to put on an EV class. That's been the biggest problem, I think. They see it as extra hassle, and they don't want extra hassle. They can fill, most of the time, not always, they can fill their events with ICE cars, And the other thing I have to say that we've had is that when we do go along to these events, generally we're kind of in the top 5, quite often in the top 3. And I've, a few of us have actually won and beaten all of the other ICE cars, right? Of course, they don't like that, do they? So they then go to their mate, the organizer, and say, "Why are you letting these EVs in?" And this
That's
is
not
something.
Fair.
Yeah, so we did an event at Abingdon 3 years ago, I think, and I was 3rd overall in that event, behind 100. It was a WRC rally car, Fiesta R5, which is like £130,000 worth of rally car, and a Lotus, which was like worth 200 grand or something ridiculous thing, and I was third. You know, my Model 3 4-door family saloon, and the next year there's no EV class. No, can't.
Oh,
It's too much hassle. We can't allow you to enter. So
that's it. Well, I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, John, but if anybody was interested in getting to motorsport from an EV point of view and have a family car, I mean, I think, you know, getting a Model 3, whether it's a long range performance, I'd probably recommend the performance because you've got the track mode and the bigger calipers and the discs, etc., more power. And really only all you have to do is upgrade the pads. I mean, yes, you could upgrade the suspension, but pads is pretty much the only thing that you'd need to do to have fun on the track there without it all going horribly wrong in terms of things overheating. Maybe some brake fluid as well.
John, in a Model 3 particularly, they don't. Yeah, so on a Model 3, for instance, you change the brake fluid for better brake fluid and put some track pads in, and you're pretty much good to go. You know, and you can't hammer around all day, but then if you hammer around all day in a nice car, the engine will overheat and the brakes will cook on that as well. Because if you look at the weight of a lot of ice cars these days, sporty ice cars, you know, they're 2 tons plus as well, you know. So, but you're right. And there are other cars. We're talking about the 5N, you know, that absolutely you can take on track straight away with the same caveats and have a good time doing it. Yeah, and there'll be more coming along very soon, I'm sure.
Because I remember back in the day doing those VXR days and stuff. Because at one point, Vauxhall had a Zafira VXR, and I remember going around the track and you saying about brakes, and that was supposed to be slightly more sporty. And I think I was in the morning session, and by about 20 laps in, the discs had walked on it. And they say, it's okay, it's done that. It's like literally the Zafira VXR, you were braking, it's like with all the, and they say, the discs have warped, they just seem to do it. I mean, touring car drivers are always a bit mad on those because they used to have touring car drivers. I remember one taking great pleasure on a VXR day saying, Vauxhall have told me I'm allowed a set of tyres for the morning and a set of tyres for the afternoon. And this was in the morning. I'm on my 4th set already.
That's brilliant. No, that's great. Have you got anything else to add, John? Anything you want to do? Shout out on the channel for anybody listening, and don't forget, everyone, just give us a like and a share if you know anyone that's interested in EV and motorsport.
Yeah, no, I think in terms of getting involved, you know, if you want more information or want to know what events are on, then maybe the best thing to do is to put something in the comments, you know, of this stream, and we can pick up on it and point you towards, you know, website or wherever where you can find out a bit more about it. But we're a little band of EV owners that do this sort of stuff. You know, we're always encouraging more people to come along and do it. So however we can help, you know, we're here to offer advice and point you in the right direction. Just ask.
Well, there we go. Open to the forum. So if anybody has got a question, whack it in the comments, or whack it in the comments after, if you're watching it after the live has been, and I'll reach out to John. I'm sure he won't mind answering the questions. I've said that without asking him, but I'm sure that's
no, fine. Yeah.
There we go.
There's one motorsport event which I think would be a great one to try and get EVs in. I don't know if any of you remember. Did Johnny Smith did a video in a Kia Picanto on the Land's End trial?
Yeah,
that's now EVs have got to the range where they could do that on a single charge as well, and I think that would be quite a fun one to do. But it's quite, they're getting to the point where the long range EVs are becoming cheap enough to do that type of thing, because you're not allowed 4-wheel drive and you're not allowed to do much to them.
Right. Yeah, I saw that.
You're allowed to jack the suspension up and put some like underbody protection, and that's about it.
Serious protection for that battery, because I saw the amount of boulders that are on that track. It'd be interesting. But
I suppose most EVs are quite armored on their battery packs anyway these days, deliberately so. Yeah,
no, that's a good point. Super, John. Thank you so much for coming on at short notice. I really, really appreciate you popping on, because you are, as far as I'm concerned, the man to talk to when it's about electric motorsport, because I know you've been in motorsport for so long and very passionate about it. So I really appreciate you coming on. Thank you very much.
Thanks. It's been great. Pleasure.
Thanks a lot.
And I'm not sure what happened to Alex. I think he lost. I think obviously something broke in Wales there. Kevin's still on, but Alex unfortunately dropped off. So I'm sure he was gutted that he couldn't finish off the rest. But we'll be here next week because we're going to be talking about wireless charging for EVs. something that doesn't really get spoken about much, and something that we, it's bound to happen. Everyone's having wireless charging for their phones. I think for cars, it'd be really, really exciting just to talk about. So hopefully we'll see everybody next week, 8 o'clock Sunday, normal time. And don't forget, this week I've got a video on fitting a 3-speaker exhaust system to Rusty, which is lots of laughs. And I've had all sorts of fun off TikTok from a few videos I've shared already. Obviously, lots of people loving that.
Yeah,
anyway, guys,
that's something I find never here. A 3-speaker exhaust.
So much love on TikTok as ever. But thanks everyone for listening, and thanks again, John and Kev, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.